You need a home, and I need a mommy. The clear voice of the little girl rang out between snowflakes. Jack Miller spun around, startled, phone still pressed to his ear, his weathered hands, calloused from decades of woodworking, clenching slightly at the unexpected words. The snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the small town of Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania in a pristine white coat. Main Street's lampposts were adorned with Christmas wreaths, their warm yellow glow creating halos in the swirling snow. At the bus stop bench sat a woman, her golden hair dusted with snowflakes, her thin coat pulled tight around her slender frame. Before her stood 5-year-old Lily, Jack's granddaughter, offering a bear-shaped cookie with the innocent confidence only children possess. Jack quickly ended his call with the lumber supplier. "Lily," he called out, hurrying across the street. His work boots crunched through the fresh snow as he approached the bus stop shelter. At 52, Jack moved with the sure-footed confidence of a man accustomed to physical labor, his broad shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. The woman looked up, her pale blue eyes meeting Jack's. There was a quiet dignity in her gaze despite her disheveled appearance. She was younger than he'd first thought, mid-30s perhaps, with high cheekbones and an elegant profile now flushed from the cold. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a worn cloth tote bag close to her chest. "I'm sorry if my granddaughter bothered you, ma'am," Jack said, reaching for Lily's hand. "She didn't," the woman replied, her voice hoarse but steady. "She's very kind." She nodded toward a scrawny cat pawing at crumbs near the bench. She gave her cookie to the cat first. Jack followed her gaze and saw the trembling animal, its ribs visible even through its matted fur. Half a torn bread roll lay in the snow. Clearly, the woman had shared her own meager food with the stray before Lily had arrived. Lily looked up at her grandfather, her brown eyes wide beneath her wool hat. "She needs to come home with us, Grandpa. It's too cold for her out here." The woman's eyes darted away, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I didn't ask for anything," she said quickly. "I'm just waiting for the bus." Jack checked his watch, knowing full well the last bus had departed hours ago. The station was closed until morning, and the temperature was dropping by the minute. He hesitated, caution warring with compassion. In his experience, kindness was rarely a mistake. But in today's world, "Last bus left at 6, he said finally. "Station's closed now." The woman's shoulders slumped slightly, but she straightened them just as quickly. "I'll be fine," she insisted, though her blue-tinged lips told a different story. Jack was about to suggest the town's small motel when the woman suddenly tried to stand. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed against the metal post of the bus shelter before sliding to the ground. "Miss!" Jack rushed forward, kneeling beside her in the snow. No response. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck. Her pulse was there, but weak and rapid. Her skin burned with fever despite the freezing temperature. Lily tugged at his coat sleeve, her voice trembling. "Is she going to die, Grandpa?" "No, sweetheart," Jack answered firmly, though worry creased his brow. "But we need to get her warm." Without hesitation, Jack scooped the woman into his arms. She was alarmingly light, her body radiating heat even through his thick coat. As he lifted her, her tattered coat fell open slightly, revealing torn sleeves and bruised arms. A small, artistic tattoo of an intertwined needle and thread peeked out from her wrist, unusual in this blue-collar town. "Grab her bag, Lily," Jack instructed, adjusting his hold on the unconscious woman. "We're taking her home." "Because she needs a home?" Lily asked, carefully picking up the worn tote bag. Jack didn't answer as they began the 3-block walk to their house. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he carried the stranger through the deserted streets of Oak Ridge. The small town had once thrived with its paper mill and furniture factory, but both had closed in the last decade, leaving behind empty storefronts and struggling families. Jack's custom woodworking shop was one of the few businesses still hanging on. His 2-story craftsman home came into view, a house he'd renovated himself after his son and daughter-in-law's fatal car accident 4 years ago. He'd moved from his cabin on the outskirts of town to raise Lily in a proper neighborhood, closer to her school and friends. The warm glow from the windows promised safety within its solid timber walls. As they approached the porch with its hand-carved railings, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake bringing this stranger into their home. But looking down at her feverish face, he knew he couldn't have left her in the snow. Some risks were worth taking, his father had always said, Some choices defined a man more than others. Inside, the house smelled of pine and the beef stew they'd had for dinner. Jack carried the woman to the guest room on the first floor, originally his woodworking office, converted to accommodate his aging mother during her final months. The woman stirred slightly as he laid her on the bed, murmuring something incoherent. "Lily, go get the thermometer and the first aid kit," Jack instructed, his voice calm despite his concern. Years as a volunteer firefighter had taught him how to handle emergencies without alarming others. While Lily scampered off, Jack removed the woman's wet shoes and covered her with a thick quilt his late wife had made. He noticed a raw, red scrape on the woman's hand and what looked like older bruises on her arms. Whatever story had brought her to Oak Ridge on this snowy night, it hadn't been a happy one. Lily returned with the supplies and watched wide-eyed as Jack took the woman's temperature. The thermometer read 103 degrees. "Is that bad?" Lily whispered. "It's pretty high," Jack answered honestly, "but we can help her." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Mike." Dr. Michael Callahan had been Jack's friend since high school. Now the town's most respected physician, Mike still made house calls for old friends, especially when those friends had once pulled him from a burning car. 20 minutes later, Mike's SUV pulled into the driveway. The stocky doctor entered with a gust of cold air, brushing snow from his salt and pepper beard. "Quite a night to be playing Good Samaritan, Jack," he remarked, though his eyes held no judgment. "Found her at the bus stop," Jack explained, leading Mike to the guest room. "Passed out cold, fever of 103. Mike's jovial expression sobered as he examined the unconscious woman. "Severe dehydration. Early pneumonia, I'd say. Has she awakened at all?" Jack shook his head. "Mumbled a bit, that's all." Mike opened his medical bag and began preparing an IV. "She needs fluids and antibiotics. Any ID? Family we should contact?" Before Jack could answer, the woman's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze, though feverish, held a sudden panic. "No one," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "There's no one who needs to know if I'm alive or not." Her eyes closed again, the brief moment of consciousness fading. Mike and Jack exchanged glances, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Mike completed the IV setup in silence, then wrote out instructions for medication and care. "I'll leave antibiotics and some fever reducers," he said. "Keep her hydrated. If the fever spikes above 104 or she has trouble breathing, call me immediately." After Mike left, Jack sat in the armchair beside the guest bed, watching the steady rise and fall of the woman's chest. Lily had finally gone to bed after extracting a promise that Jack would wake her if their guest improved. In the quiet of the room, Jack studied the stranger's face. Even in illness, there was a certain grace to her features. What had brought her to this point? What had made a young woman believe no one cared whether she lived or died? Jack knew something about loss. The crushing weight of it, the way it could hollow you out from the inside. 4 years ago, when the police had come to tell him about the icy road, the failed brakes, his son and daughter-in-law's car wrapped around a tree, he'd felt his world collapse. Only Lily, then just a year old, had given him purpose to continue. The woman stirred, murmuring in her sleep. Her hand, delicate despite its rawness, clutched at the quilt. Jack noticed the fine, almost invisible scars across her fingertips, the kind seamstresses often develop from years of needlework. Before leaving the room, Jack wrote a brief note and placed it beside a glass of water on the nightstand. "You're not invisible, Jay." Morning arrived with fresh snow and bright sunshine. Jack was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast when he heard movement from the guest room. He'd checked on the woman several times during the night, relieved to find her fever had dropped to 101 by dawn. Lily was still asleep upstairs, exhausted from the excitement of the previous evening. Jack poured a cup of strong coffee and debated whether to check on their guest or give her privacy. The decision was made for him when he heard a soft thud followed by a muffled exclamation. He found the woman attempting to stand, one hand braced against the nightstand, the other pressed to her head. She'd changed into the clean clothes he'd left for her, an old flannel shirt of his and a pair of his late wife's sweatpants, both too large but better than her damp ones. "You should stay in bed," Jack said, keeping his distance in the doorway. "Doctor says you have got pneumonia." The woman startled at his voice, nearly losing her balance. Up close and in daylight, Jack could sweet. Her eyes were not just blue, but an unusual shade that shifted between blue and gray, like the ocean before a storm. I need to go, she said, though she could barely stand. I've imposed enough. It's 20 degrees outside, you've got a fever of 101, and there's a foot of snow on the ground, Jack replied matter-of-factly. You're not imposing, you're recovering. Doctor's orders. She wavered, clearly torn between pride and practicality. Finally, she sank back onto the edge of the bed. I don't have any way to repay you. Not looking for payment, Jack said simply. Coffee? It's strong enough to stand a spoon in. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That sounds wonderful, actually. Jack nodded and turned to leave. Wait, she called softly. My name is Catherine Reynolds. Kate. Jack turned back. Jack Miller. The little girl who found you is my granddaughter, Lily. Thank you, Jack, Kate said, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time. For not leaving me in the snow. Jack simply nodded again and went to fetch the coffee. Some things didn't need acknowledging with words. In the kitchen, he poured a second mug and added a spoonful of honey, good for a sore throat. When he returned, Kate was examining the note he'd left her, her fingers tracing the words. Did you mean this? She asked, holding up the paper. Jack set the coffee on the nightstand. Wouldn't have written it otherwise. Kate wrapped her hands around the warm mug, studying him over the rim as she took a careful sip. Jack Miller was not what she'd expected. Tall and solidly built, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard, he had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. His hands were strong and calloused, with several small scars, working hands. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Deep blue and direct, with crow's feet at the corners that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor implied. You're a carpenter? She asked, noticing the sawdust that clung to his flannel shirt. Woodworker, he corrected. Custom furniture, mostly. Some restoration work. You built this house, Kate said. It wasn't a question. She'd noticed the craftsmanship immediately, the hand-carved moldings, the perfectly fitted hardwood floors, the unique built-in bookshelves. Jack nodded. Renovated it. The bones were good, but it needed work. Kate was about to ask another question when rapid footsteps sounded in the hallway. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her brown curls a wild tangle around her face. You're awake, she exclaimed, her face lighting up at the sight of Kate. Without hesitation, she bounded into the room and climbed onto the foot of the bed. I knew you wouldn't die. Grandpa knows how to fix everything. Lily, Jack admonished gently, our guest needs rest. But Kate was smiling, a real smile that transformed her face. It's all right, she assured him, then turned to Lily. Thank you for the cookie yesterday. It was delicious. Grandpa and I made them, Lily announced proudly. He lets me use the special cookie cutters that belong to Grandma. Do you like bears? I do, Kate replied, especially ones made of cookie. Lily beamed, then studied Kate with unabashed curiosity. Why were you at the bus stop? Were you going somewhere or coming back? Lily, Jack said in a warning tone, that's not polite. Kate shook her head. It's okay. She hesitated, then answered honestly, I was trying to get to Philadelphia, but I ran out of money for the bus fare. Philadelphia is far away, Lily remarked. Do you have family there? A shadow crossed Kate's face. No, just possibilities. Jack recognized the careful evasion. Whatever Kate Reynolds was seeking in Philadelphia, it wasn't a reunion. Lily, why don't you go get dressed? Then you can help me make some toast and eggs for our guest. Lily nodded and slid off the bed, but paused at the door. You can stay until you get better, she told Kate solemnly. But I think you should stay longer. After she'd gone, an awkward silence fell. Kate stared into her coffee cup. She's a remarkable child. She is, Jack agreed, pride evident in his voice. Your son or daughter? Kate left the question hanging. My son and his wife, Jack said, his tone softening with old grief. Car accident 4 years ago. I've been raising Lily since. Kate's expression showed genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, she's lucky to have you. Jack shrugged off the compliment. We manage. He nodded toward the door. I should help her with breakfast before she tries using the stove by herself again. He paused. You're welcome to join us if you're feeling up to it. Otherwise, I can bring a tray in here. I'll try to come out, Kate said. I've been still too long already. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. Bathrooms across the hall if you need it. Take your time. Left alone, Kate sat on the edge of the bed, testing her strength. Her head still pounded and her chest ached with each breath, but the bone-deep chill that had gripped her for days had finally begun to recede. She looked around the room, taking in details she'd missed in her feverish state. Unlike the rest of the house with its warm woods and craftsman details, this room had a more feminine touch. Floral curtains, a patchwork quilt, watercolor landscapes on the walls. Something about it felt like a memorial. Carefully, Kate made her way to the small bathroom across the hall. The mirror revealed what she'd expected. Her face pale and drawn, her once lustrous blonde hair limp and in need of washing. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her cheekbones stood out too sharply after weeks of too little food. She splashed water on her face and used a spare toothbrush, still in its package, that had been left on the counter. Small kindnesses that nearly brought tears to her eyes. How long had it been since anyone had shown her consideration? From somewhere in the house came the sound of laughter. Lily's high, clear giggle and Jack's deeper chuckle. The sound of family, of belonging. Something Kate had nearly forgotten existed. By the time Kate made her way to the kitchen, Lily had set the table and Jack was serving scrambled eggs and toast. Through the windows, she could see Jack's workshop in the backyard, a large, well-built structure with smoke curling from its chimney. "You work from home," she observed as Jack pulled out a chair for her. "Have for 15 years, he confirmed. "Started in my garage, built the workshop when orders increased." A flicker of something, worry perhaps, crossed his face before he masked it. "What do you make?" Kate asked, taking a small bite of toast. Her stomach growled, reminding her how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. "Custom furniture, mostly," Jack replied. "Tables, chairs, cabinets, some artistic pieces when I get the commission." "He makes beautiful things," Lily chimed in, mouth full of eggs. "He's teaching me, too. I can sand already." "Only with supervision," Jack reminded her gently. Kate smiled at Lily's enthusiasm. "My grandfather was a craftsman, too," she said. "He made violins." Jack's eyebrows rose slightly. "Luthieri is a rare art." "He learned in Italy before immigrating," Kate explained. "I used to watch him for hours when I was about Lily's age. The patience it took, the attention to detail." She trailed off, lost in memory. "Did you learn?" Jack asked. Kate shook her head. "Not violins, but he taught me to appreciate craftsmanship, the value of creating something with your hands." She looked down at her own hands, the fine scars across her fingertips. "It shaped my career choices. Before—" She stopped abruptly. Jack didn't press. Instead, he turned to Lily. "School's canceled today because of the snow. Why don't you go get your project from the workshop after breakfast? You can show Kate." Lily's face lit up. "Can I? It's almost done." "Just be careful crossing the yard," Jack cautioned, "and don't touch any tools." While Lily finished her breakfast in record time and bundled up to retrieve her mysterious project, Jack refilled Kate's coffee. "You don't have to talk about it," he said quietly. "Your past, not my business." Kate met his gaze. "Thank you. It's not something I'm proud of, or rather, the way it ended." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. Everyone in Oak Ridge had a story, a reason they'd stayed in or returned to the struggling town. Some stories were shared openly, others remained private burdens. "How long have you lived in Oak Ridge?" Kate asked, changing the subject. "All my life, except for 4 years in the Marines," Jack replied. "This house belonged to my parents. After they passed, I rented it out while I lived in a cabin I built up in the hills. Moved back here when Lily came to live with me." "It's a beautiful home," Kate said sincerely. "You can feel the care that went into it." A hint of pride crossed Jack's face. "My father built cabinets, taught me everything I know about woodworking. After he died, fixing up this place felt like keeping him around somehow." The back door burst open before Kate could respond, and Lily rushed in, carefully carrying a small wooden object wrapped in a cloth. "I got it," she announced, setting her bundle on the table and unwrapping it with dramatic flair. "Ta-da!" It was a small, dollhouse-sized structure, a miniature cabin with detailed shingles on the roof and tiny windows. Though clearly made by a child's hands, it showed remarkable attention to detail for a 5-year-old. Did you make this? Kate asked, genuinely impressed. Lily nodded proudly. Grandpa helps with the hard parts, but I did the sanding and the shingling all by myself. She's got a good eye, Jack mid, the pride in his voice unmistakable. Better than mine was at her age. Kate carefully examined the little cabin. It's wonderful, Lily. Are you going to paint it? Lily shook her head vigorously. Grandpa says good wood should show its grain. Only inferior materials need to be covered up. She recited the words with the solemn precision of a child repeating an important lesson. Kate smiled, glancing at Jack. Your grandfather is right. The wood is beautiful as it is. Jack cleared his throat, looking slightly embarrassed. It's something my father used to say. It's true, though, Kate said, running a finger along the tiny cabin's roofline. In design school, we learned that the best materials speak for themselves. True craftsmanship enhances natural beauty rather than disguising it. Design school? Lily asked curiously. Kate hesitated, then nodded. I studied fashion design. I used to make clothes and accessories. Like dresses and purses? Lily's eyes widened with interest. Among other things, yes. Can you make a dress for my doll? Her name is Princess Sparkle, and she needs a ball gown. Lily's request was delivered with such earnest hope that Kate couldn't help but smile. Lily, Jack admonished gently, Miss Reynolds is our guest, not your personal seamstress. It's Kate, please, she corrected, then turned to Lily. And I'd be happy to make something for Princess Sparkle once I'm feeling better. It's been a while since I've sewn anything, but I think I can manage a doll dress. Lily beamed, then looked thoughtful. If you make dresses, why were you at the bus stop instead of in a fancy store? Lily, Jack's voice held a warning note, but Kate shook her head. It's a fair question. She considered how to explain to a child. Sometimes in life, things don't work out the way we plan. I had a job designing for a big company, but it ended badly. I lost my apartment, my savings. I was trying to get to Philadelphia to start over. Because there are dress shops there? Lily asked. Because there are opportunities there, Kate corrected gently. Places where I might find work. Lily considered this, then declared with a child's certainty, You should stay here. You can make dresses in Grandpa's workshop. There's room. Jack coughed, clearly embarrassed. Lily, Ms. Kate, has her own plans. She's just staying until she's well enough to travel. Lily looked unconvinced, but was distracted by the sound of a vehicle pulling into the driveway. Jack glanced out the window and his expression brightened. That'll be Sarah with her boys, he explained to Kate. Lily's friend Ryan and his brother Noah. They live down the street. Lily, why don't you show Ryan your cabin, he suggested, and Lily eagerly wrapped up her project, ready to impress her friend. As Jack went to answer the door, Kate heard a woman's warm voice greeting him, followed by the energetic chatter of young boys. She felt suddenly out of place, acutely aware of being a stranger in this close-knit world. The kitchen was sufferant with activity as Sarah Parker, a friendly woman in her 30s, introduced herself and her sons, Ryan, who was Lily's age, and Noah, a gangly 10-year-old. Sarah brought out a thermos of homemade chicken soup, explaining that Mike mentioned you had a patient, with a knowing smile at Jack. Small towns, Jack explained to Kate with a shrug. News travels. Good news travels, Sarah corrected, handing Kate a mug of the steaming soup. Like how Jack Miller, who barely lets anyone past his workshop door these days, has opened his home to someone in need. Kate accepted the soup gratefully, though she felt her cheeks warm at being the subject of town gossip. He and Lily have been very kind. Sarah's expression was warm but assessing. Jack's one of the good ones. Old school values in a world that's forgotten them. She turned to Jack. The boys and I are heading to the community center to help with the winter donation drive. We can take Lily if you'd like some peace and quiet. Jack glanced at Kate, clearly torn between his responsibilities to his granddaughter and his unexpected guest. Go ahead, Kate encouraged. I'm just going to rest anyway. The doctor's orders, remember? Jack hesitated, then nodded. If you're sure, I've got some work to finish in the shop anyway. As the children bundled up and prepared to leave, Lily made Jack promise to check on Kate regularly. And don't forget to show her the special wood, she added mysteriously, before Sarah ushered her out with the boys. After they'd gone, the house felt suddenly quiet. Jack cleared the breakfast dishes, his movements efficient and practiced. Special wood? Kate asked, curious despite her fatigue. Jack looked slightly embarrassed. Just some unusual pieces I've been saving. Lily thinks they're magical because of the grain patterns. I'd like to see them, Kate said sincerely, when you have time. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. Rest first. Doctor's orders. True to his word, Jack checked on Kate throughout the morning. She slept fitfully, her dreams troubled by memories she'd rather forget. Around noon, she woke to find a fresh glass of water and 2 pills beside her bed, along with another note. For fever, back at 102 J. The gesture, so simple yet thoughtful, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. How long had it been since anyone had cared whether she was comfortable, whether she had what she needed? When Jack returned at 1 o'clock, Kate was sitting up in bed, sketching on a notepad she'd found in the nightstand drawer. She quickly closed it as he entered. Feeling any better? He asked, setting down a mug of tea. Kate nodded. The fever's down. Thank you for the medicine. Jack acknowledged her thanks with a slight nod. Lily called from the community center. She's helping sort donations and wanted to stay longer. Sarah will bring her home before dinner. She's a remarkable child, Kate said, so thoughtful for her age. She's had to grow up faster than she should have, Jack replied, a hint of old grief in his voice. Losing her parents so young. But she has you, Kate pointed out. That makes all the difference. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. He nodded toward the notepad. You were drawing? Kate hesitated, then opened the pad to reveal a sketch of a dress with unusual details, wooden buttons and inlaid wooden panels that followed the natural curves of the garment. Just an old habit, she explained. I always sketch when I'm processing things. Jack studied the drawing with genuine interest. That's wood integrated into the design. Yes, I've always been interested in mixing unconventional materials. My grandfather's influence, I suppose. It's good, Jack said simply. Different. Coming from him, Kate sensed the words held more weight than effusive praise from others might have. Thank you. Jack nodded toward the window. Snow's letting up. If you're feeling up to it, I could show you the workshop. Get you out of this room for a bit. Kate's face brightened. I'd like that. Jack found an old pair of his late wife's snow boots that fit Kate reasonably well and wrapped her in a thick wool coat before leading her across the snowy backyard to his workshop. The cold air burned Kate's lungs, but the fresh oxygen felt wonderful after being confined indoors. The workshop was larger than it had appeared from the house, a timber-framed structure with high ceilings and large windows to maximize natural light. The moment Jack opened the door, Kate was enveloped in the rich smell of wood and varnish, a scent so reminiscent of her grandfather's workshop that she felt an immediate sense of familiarity. The space was immaculately organized, with different woods sorted by type and size. Various projects in different stages of completion occupied workbenches around the perimeter. In the center stood a large table that was clearly Jack's primary work surface, its top smooth from years of use. This is incredible, Kate said sincerely, taking in the collection of hand tools arranged on the wall, many of them clearly antique but well-maintained. Been building it up for 20 years, Jack replied, the pride in his voice evident despite his modest words. Started with my father's tools and added as I could afford to. Kate moved slowly around the workshop, examining the various projects. A rocking chair with intricate inlay work, a hope chest with hand-carved roses trailing across its lid, a set of dining chairs with gracefully curved backs. These are beautiful, she murmured. True craftsmanship. Jack watched her, surprised by her genuine appreciation. Most visitors to his workshop made polite comments, but didn't truly see the details he labored over. Kate, he noticed, ran her fingers along the grain, traced the joinery with a practiced eye, noted the balance between form and function. You understand it, he observed. The work. Kate nodded. My grandfather taught me to see the soul in handmade things, how each piece carries something of its maker. She smiled faintly. It's why I went into design rather than mass production. I wanted to create things that held meaning. Jack nodded, recognizing a kindred spirit. He moved to a covered section in the corner of the workshop. This is what Lily wanted me to show you. The special wood. He pulled back the cloth to reveal several unusual pieces of wood. Burls, figured maple with stunning grain patterns, a piece of spalted oak, with black lines creating natural artwork through the wood. Most woodworkers would cut around these features, Jack explained. They're considered flaws, imperfections that make the wood harder to work with. Kate leaned closer, tracing the intricate patterns with her finger. They're beautiful. That's what Lily says. Jack picked up a piece of maple with a stunning flame pattern. She doesn't understand why anyone would want plain wood when they could have this. She's right, Kate said. The most interesting people I've known are those with visible flaws, experiences that have marked them but made them unique. Their eyes met, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of shared values, perhaps, or simply the understanding that comes from having weathered one's own storms. The moment was broken by the sound of the workshop door opening as a blast of cold air announced Lily's arrival. She bounded in, cheeks red from the cold, eyes bright with excitement. "You're showing her the special wood," she exclaimed happily. "I knew she'd understand." Behind her came Sarah, carrying a cardboard box. "Found these at the donation center," she said, setting the box on a workbench. "Fabric scraps, some sewing supplies. Thought they might be useful given what Lily told me." She glanced meaningfully at Kate. Kate looked surprised. "For me?" Lily nodded eagerly. "For Princess Sparkle's dress, and maybe other things too." Jack started to protest, but Sarah waved him off. "They were just going to sit in storage, Jack. Better they go to someone who can use them." Kate approached the box hesitantly, then looked inside. Various fabric remnants, several spools of thread, a small sewing kit, and what appeared to be a partially disassembled vintage sewing machine. "The machine needs work," Sarah admitted, "but Mike said you're staying at least until the antibiotics were finished, so maybe—" "Thank you," Kate said, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll make Princess Sparkle the prettiest dress ever," Lily suggested, bouncing on her toes. Despite her fatigue, Kate laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "That I can promise." As the afternoon light began to fade, Jack insisted Kate return to the house to rest. To his surprise, she asked if she could take the box of sewing supplies and one of the special wood pieces, a small burl with extraordinary figuring. "I have an idea," was all she would say. That evening, after a simple dinner and after Lily had gone to bed, Jack found Kate at the kitchen table, carefully working with needle and thread. Before her lay a small doll dress fashioned from one of the fabric scraps, a deep blue velvet with delicate embroidery along the hem. But it was the bodice of the dress that had caught his attention. Kate had somehow incorporated thin slices of the burl wood, sanded paper thin and polished to a soft glow, creating an organic pattern across the doll's chest and shoulders. "That's remarkable," Jack said quietly, not wanting to startle her. Kate looked up, a flicker of self-consciousness crossing her face. "It's just a simple experiment, to see if the wood would be flexible enough when cut this thin." "It's more than that," Jack disagreed, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. "It's innovation. I've never seen wood used that way in clothing." "My professors would say it's impractical," Kate replied with a small smile. "And they'd be right. But sometimes impractical things are worth doing simply because they're beautiful." Jack nodded, understanding completely. He'd built pieces that defied conventional wisdom simply because he saw potential where others didn't. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "With your career, if you don't mind me asking." Kate's hand stilled on the tiny dress. For a long moment, Jack thought she wouldn't answer. Then she set down her needle and looked up at him. "I worked for a company called Velmont Designs," she began, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "I was a rising designer, developing a line that incorporated unconventional materials, wood, stone, elements most fashion houses wouldn't consider." She paused, tracing the wood grain on the doll dress with her fingertip. "Charles Velmont, the CEO and my," she hesitated, "boyfriend at the time, was enthusiastic about my ideas. Until they started gaining attention. Then suddenly my designs were appearing in his main collection, only with his name on them. When I confronted him, he claimed I'd stolen the concepts from the company's design archive." Jack's expression darkened. "He stole your work." Kate nodded. "And when I tried to prove the designs were mine, I discovered he'd deleted my original files, removed my preliminary sketches from the office. My word against his, and he was Charles Velmont III, heir to the Velmont fashion empire. I was just a scholarship girl from Ohio with more ambition than connections. That's more than unfair, Jack said, anger evident in his tone. It's criminal. The fashion world closed ranks, Kate continued. My reputation was ruined. I couldn't get interviews, much less a position. The few friends I had in the industry disappeared. Then came the eviction notice, the maxed out credit cards. She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the pain in her eyes. I've been working my way east, taking odd jobs, trying to reach Philadelphia where a former professor might help me restart. And instead, you ended up at a bus stop in Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania, Jack finished for her. A ghost of a smile touched Kate's lips, where a little girl with a bear cookie found me. Jack was quiet for a moment, processing her story. It explained so much, the wariness in her eyes, the defensive pride, the way she'd insisted she would leave as soon as possible. For what it's worth, he said finally, I believe you. 3 simple words, but Kate's eyes widened as if he'd said something profound. You do? I've met men like Charles Velmont, Jack said, his voice hardening slightly. Men who think their name and money entitle them to take whatever they want. And I've watched you with that fabric and wood. Those aren't the hands of someone who steals ideas. They're the hands of someone who creates them. Kate blinked rapidly, looking down at the doll dress to hide the sudden moisture in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what that means. Jack nodded, understanding the weight of being believed after being doubted for so long. He rose from the table and moved to a cabinet in the corner, returning with 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. Medicinal, he said with the faintest hint of a smile, pouring a small amount into each glass. For the pneumonia. Kate accepted the glass, a real smile warming her features. I think I've heard that somewhere before. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the bourbon warming a path down Kate's throat. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, the flakes visible in the pool of light cast by the porch lamp. What about you? Kate asked eventually. You're clearly talented enough to work anywhere. Why stay in Oak Ridge when the factories are closing and people are leaving? Jack swirled the bourbon in his glass, considering his answer. This is home, he said simply. My roots are here. My family is buried in the cemetery on Oak Hill. My memories, good and bad, are here. He took a sip before continuing. After Lily's parents died, she needed stability more than anything. A familiar place, familiar faces. The city might offer more opportunities, but some things are worth more than opportunity. Kate nodded, understanding. Community. Belonging. Yes, Jack glanced around the kitchen with its hand-built cabinets and the marks on the doorframe tracking Lily's growth. And this is where I do my best work. Where I can hear my father's voice guiding my hands. Where I can feel my son's presence when the light hits a certain way. You're lucky, Kate said softly, to have such deep roots. Jack studied her for a moment. Roots can be replanted, he said. It's harder, takes more care, but it can be done. Kate met his gaze, understanding he wasn't just talking about trees or plants. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something like hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Oak Ridge in pristine white. Inside Jack Miller's warm kitchen, 2 wounded souls found unexpected common ground in the understanding that sometimes the most beautiful creations come from what others might consider flawed materials. The following week brought clearer skies to Oak Ridge, the snow melting just enough to reveal patches of frozen ground beneath. Kate's health improved steadily under Jack's careful attention. By the 4th day, her fever had subsided completely, though Dr. Mike insisted she continue the antibiotics for the full course. Pneumonia is not something to mess with, he'd cautioned during his follow-up visit, especially after what your body's been through. Kate had avoided Jack's eyes at that comment. They both knew Mike had seen the signs of prolonged malnutrition, the healing bruises from sleeping rough. Some stories needed no telling. On her 5th morning in the Miller home, Kate woke early. The house was quiet, with only the distant sounds of Jack moving about in the kitchen. She dressed in borrowed clothes that Sarah had brought over, simple jeans and sweaters that hung loosely on her still thin frame. In the bathroom mirror, Kate noticed her face had begun to regain some color, the hollows beneath her cheekbones less pronounced. The kitchen smelled of coffee and something sweet baking in the oven. Jack stood at the counter, reviewing what appeared to be invoices, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wore his work clothes, sturdy canvas pants, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle from decades of woodworking. "Morning," Kate said softly, not wanting to startle him. Jack looked up, his expression softening slightly. "You're up early. How are you feeling?" "Better," Kate replied, moving to pour herself coffee from the pot. "Almost human again." Jack nodded, seeming pleased. "Lily's still asleep. School's back in session today. She's not happy about it." "I can imagine," Kate smiled, leaning against the counter. She gestured toward the papers. "Work." A shadow crossed Jack's face. "Just business. Nothing interesting." But Kate had caught a glimpse of the letterhead on one of the documents. Oak Ridge Community Bank. Final notice emblazoned in red across the top. She didn't press, understanding the pride that made a man like Jack Miller reluctant to discuss financial troubles. "I finished Princess Sparkle's dress," she said instead, changing the subject. "The wood inlay worked better than I expected." Jack's expression lightened. "Lily will be thrilled. She's been talking about it nonstop to anyone who'll listen." "It's the least I could do," Kate said, warming her hands around the coffee mug. "For everything you've both done for me." Jack waved away her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Kate shook her head. "They wouldn't. Trust me, I've learned that lesson the hard way." Before Jack could respond, the oven timer buzzed. He moved to pull out a tray of cinnamon rolls, their rich aroma filling the kitchen. "Lily's favorite," he explained. "Special treat for the first day back at school." Kate watched as he deftly glazed the rolls, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate pastry. There was something deeply comforting about Jack Miller, a solid, dependable presence in a world that had proven anything but to Kate. "I should be moving on soon," she said suddenly, the words emerging before she'd fully formed the thought. "Now that I'm better." Jack's hands stilled momentarily, then resumed their work. "No rush," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Doctor said another week of rest would be good." "I've imposed enough," Kate insisted, "and I need to get to Philadelphia, try to connect with my old professor before the new design season starts." Jack nodded, not looking up from the cinnamon rolls. "We can check the bus schedule. Might be able to help with the fare." "I couldn't accept that," Kate said quickly. "You've done too much already." Jack finally met her eyes, his gaze steady. "It's not charity, Kate. It's one person helping another. The way things should work." Before Kate could respond, they heard Lily's footsteps on the stairs, followed by her appearance in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is that cinnamon rolls?" she asked hopefully, her face brightening at the sight of the tray. "Special breakfast for a special day," Jack confirmed, setting a plate at her usual spot. Lily climbed onto her chair, then noticed Kate standing by the counter. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her perceptiveness catching Kate off guard. "Not today," Kate assured her, "but soon. I need to continue my journey to Philadelphia." Lily's face fell. "But you just got better, and you still need to teach me how to sew like you do." Jack cleared his throat. "Kate has important things to do in Philadelphia, Lily. We need to respect that." "More important than us?" The innocent question hung in the air, laden with imaginations that a 5-year-old couldn't possibly understand. "Different," Kate said gently, moving to sit beside Lily at the table. "Not more important. I have to try to rebuild my life, my career. But that doesn't mean my time here hasn't been special." Lily poked at her cinnamon roll, clearly unconvinced. "But you could build things here, with us. Grandpa has lots of wood, and now you have fabric." Jack intervened, sensing Kate's discomfort. "That's enough, Lily. Eat your breakfast so we can get you ready for school." The morning progressed with the familiar routine of a family preparing for the day. Jack packing Lily's lunch, while Kate helped the little girl choose an outfit and brush her hair. It felt strangely natural, as if Kate had been part of this household for months rather than days. After Jack left to walk Lily to school, Kate found herself alone in the house. She wandered through the rooms, noting the personal touches that made it a home. Lily's artwork displayed proudly on the refrigerator, Jack's handcrafted furniture in every room, family photos arranged on the mantel. One in particular caught her eye, a younger Jack in his Marine uniform, standing proudly beside a young man who could only be his son. The resemblance was striking. Kate touched the frame gently, understanding the loss that had shaped this household. Her own losses seemed different somehow, the theft of her future rather than her past. But the emptiness it created felt familiar. She made her way to the guest room and gathered the few possessions she'd accumulated. The sewing supplies from Sarah, her sketches, the small wooden burl Jack had given her. She should be planning her departure, figuring out how to reach Philadelphia with the meager funds she'd managed to save from odd jobs along her journey east. Instead, she found herself drawn to the window that overlooked Jack's workshop. Smoke curled from its chimney, indicating he'd returned from dropping Lily at school and was already at work. Without consciously deciding to do so, Kate pulled on her borrowed coat and boots and headed across the snowy yard. The workshop door was ajar, and the sound of a hand plane moving across wood greeted her as she approached. She paused at the entrance, watching Jack work. He stood at his bench, completely absorbed in shaping a piece of maple that would eventually become part of a rocking chair. His movements were fluid and precise, each stroke of the plane removing a perfect curl of wood. "May I come in?" Kate asked. Jack looked up, surprised but not displeased. Of course, Kate entered, closing the door behind her against the winter chill. The workshop was warm from the wood stove in the corner, the air fragrant with freshly cut lumber and linseed oil. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, moving to stand near the workbench. Jack set down his plane. "Just getting ahead on a commission, nothing urgent." Kate nodded toward the partially assembled rocking chair. "It's beautiful, traditional but with your own touches." Jack's expression softened with pride. "Good eye. Most people don't notice the modifications to the standard design." "The slightly wider arm rests," Kate observed, "and you've adjusted the angle of the back spindles." Jack nodded, impressed. "For better balance and comfort. Small changes that make a big difference in how it feels." "That's true of most design," Kate agreed. "The details matter more than people realize." Jack studied her for a moment, then gestured to a stool near the workbench. "Have a seat if you'd like to stay a while." Kate sat, drawing her coat closer despite the workshop's warmth. "I've been thinking about how to thank you for everything," she began. "I don't have much to offer, but I thought maybe I could help around the workshop until I leave. Basic tasks, organizing. I'm good with my hands, and I learn quickly." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You don't need to earn your keep, Kate." "I know," she said quickly, "but I'd like to contribute something. And honestly, I'd rather be busy than sitting alone in the house thinking about—" She trailed off, not needing to elaborate on the thoughts that plagued her quiet moments. Jack considered her offer, then nodded toward a corner of the workshop where several pieces of special wood, the burls and figured pieces, lay partially sorted. "Those need organizing by type and potential use. Been meaning to get to it for months." Kate smiled, recognizing the gift of meaningful work. "I can handle that." They fell into a comfortable rhythm over the next few hours, Jack working on his rocking chair, Kate sorting and cataloging the unusual wood pieces. She worked methodically, occasionally asking questions about a particular grain pattern or color variation. Jack answered patiently, sometimes coming over to examine a piece she found particularly interesting. "This one's spectacular," Kate said, holding up a burl with swirling patterns that resembled a stormy sea. "What would you use it for?" Jack took the piece, turning it in his hands. "Table inlay, maybe, or a decorative box lid, something that showcases the pattern." "It would make amazing buttons," Kate mused. "Or inlays for a collar piece." Jack handed the burl back to her. "Take it. See what you can create." Kate hesitated. "Jack, I couldn't. These pieces are valuable." "To someone who appreciates them," he agreed, "which you clearly do." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the wood, a brief contact that sent an unexpected warmth through Kate's hand. She looked up to find Jack watching her, something unreadable in his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. The moment was broken by the workshop door swinging open, bringing a gust of cold air and the town's postman, Bill Jenkins. "Morning, Jack," Bill called cheerfully, stomping snow from his boots. "Got a certified letter for you. Need your signature." Jack set down his tools and moved to sign for the envelope, his expression guarded. Kate noticed the same bank logo on the letter that she'd seen on the documents that morning. "And who might this be?" Bill asked, noticing Kate for the first time. "Kate Reynolds," Jack replied before she could speak. "Friend of the family, visiting from Ohio." Bill's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded politely to Kate. Nice to meet you, Miss Reynolds. Don't often see new faces in Oak Ridge this time of year. Just passing through, Kate said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. After Bill left, Jack tucked the unopened letter into his back pocket. Town's favorite source of news, he explained dryly. If he doesn't know your business, he'll make it up. Kate nodded, understanding. Small towns had their own rhythm, their own way of absorbing or rejecting newcomers. She'd experienced both in her journey east. They returned to their work, but the easy camaraderie had shifted. Jack seemed preoccupied, his movements less fluid, his focus broken. Kate sensed the letter weighed on him, but she knew better than to pry. Around noon, they heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the workshop window, Kate saw an expensive black SUV with tinted windows, out of place in the modest neighborhood. Jack frowned, setting down his tools and moving toward the door. Stay here, he said quietly to Kate. I'll see who it is. Kate nodded but moved to the window where she could observe without being seen. A tall man in an expensive overcoat emerged from the SUV, his polished leather shoes incongruous against the slushy driveway. Even from a distance, there was something familiar about his confident stance, the way he surveyed the property with an appraising eye. When he turned toward the house, Kate gasped softly. Charles Velmont III looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a polished, manufactured way, his dark hair expertly styled, his movements calculated for maximum impact. What was he doing in Oak Ridge of all places? It couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Kate shrank back from the window, her heart pounding. She watched as Jack approached Charles, their body language clearly adversarial from the first words exchanged. Though she couldn't hear what they were saying, she could see Jack's posture stiffen, his shoulders square as if preparing for a confrontation. After several minutes of conversation, Charles handed Jack what appeared to be a business card, then returned to his SUV. As he opened the driver's door, he paused and looked directly toward the workshop, as if sensing he was being observed. Kate pulled further back into the shadows, her breath caught in her throat. The SUV backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. Moments later, Jack returned to the workshop, his expression thunderous. What did he want? Kate asked, though she dreaded the answer. Jack looked at her sharply. You know who that was. It wasn't a question. Kate nodded slowly. Charles Velmont. What I don't know is why he's here. Jack pulled the business card from his pocket and tossed it onto the workbench. Says he's scouting locations for a new artisanal retreat for his company executives. Wants to buy several properties in Oak Ridge to convert into a private compound. His jaw tightened, including this one. Kate felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. That can't be a coincidence. No, Jack agreed, his voice hard. He asked about you specifically. Said he'd heard a former employee might be staying here. Kate sank onto the stool, her legs suddenly weak. How could he know? Small towns, Jack said grimly. Word travels, especially about money troubles. I should leave, Kate said immediately. Now, today. I don't want to bring trouble to you and Lily. Jack's expression softened slightly. Running won't solve anything, Kate. And besides, he's already found you. You don't understand, Kate insisted, her voice tight with anxiety. Charles doesn't just take what he wants. He destroys anyone who gets in his way. He's here because of me, which means you and Lily could get caught in the crossfire. I've dealt with men like him before, Jack said, his tone leaving no doubt that he could handle himself. What exactly did he do to you, Kate, beyond stealing your designs? Kate looked away, the memories rising unwelcome in her mind. After I confronted him about the theft, he made sure I couldn't work anywhere in the industry. Called in favors, spread rumors. Then when my savings ran out and I couldn't make rent, he offered to help if I'd sign away rights to all my past and future designs. She swallowed hard. When I refused, things got unpleasant. He threatened you, Jack surmised, his voice dangerously calm. Not directly. He's too smart for that. But suddenly my apartment was broken into, my portfolio destroyed. My few remaining contacts stopped returning calls. It was like being slowly erased. Jack was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, he said, So you left New York? Kate nodded. I had no choice. I took odd jobs, waitressing, alterations at dry cleaners, whatever I could find. Worked my way east toward Philadelphia, saving every penny. A bitter smile crossed her face. Until a bout of pneumonia wiped out my savings for antibiotics, and I ended up at your bus stop. Jack studied her, his blue eyes thoughtful. And now Velmont shows up in Oak Ridge, supposedly interested in real estate. It's not a coincidence, Kate repeated. He must have somehow tracked me here. A new thought struck her, sending a chill through her body. Unless he's been following me all along, making sure I stay ruined. The idea was terrifying, that her journey, her struggles, had been monitored by the man who'd already taken so much from her. It seemed paranoid, and yet, Jack moved closer, his solid presence reassuring. Either way, you're not facing him alone anymore. Kate looked up, surprised by the protective edge in his voice. This isn't your fight, Jack. It became my fight when he showed up at my door, Jack replied simply. He glanced at his watch. I need to pick up Lily from school soon. We'll figure this out, Kate. For now, just stay close to home. Kate nodded, grateful for his calm strength, even as worry gnawed at her. Jack might be capable and courageous, but Charles Velmont wielded the kind of power that couldn't be fought with physical strength alone. After Jack left to collect Lily, Kate remained in the workshop, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. The unexpected appearance of Charles had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Just when she'd begun to feel safe, to believe she might rebuild some version of her life, the past had found her again. She moved restlessly around the workshop, fingers trailing over the tools of Jack's trade, chisels arranged by size, planes lined up with military precision, saws hanging in protective sheaths. Each item spoke of care, of craftsmanship, of a life built on solid principles, the complete opposite of the world Charles Velmont inhabited. Her gaze fell on the bank letter Jack had received earlier, now lying on the corner of his workbench where he must have placed it before going to meet Charles. The envelope had been open, its contents partially visible. Though she knew she shouldn't look, concern overrode propriety. The letter confirmed what she'd suspected. Jack's business was in financial trouble. The bank was calling in a loan that had been extended several times already. Unless substantial payment was made within 30 days, they would begin foreclosure proceedings on both the workshop and the house. Kate carefully returned the letter to exactly where Jack had left it, her mind racing. This explained the worry she'd glimpsed in his eyes when reviewing invoices, the careful budgeting she'd noticed in the household. And now Charles Velmont was offering to buy his property, a lifeline that would come at an unimaginable cost. By the time Jack returned with Lily, Kate had composed herself, tucking away her concerns behind a warm smile for the excited 5-year-old eager to share her school day adventures. We made snow globes, Lily announced, proudly displaying a mason jar containing a tiny pine tree surrounded by glitter suspended in water. And Miss Thompson said mine was the best because the tree looks real. It's beautiful, Kate agreed, admiring the child's handiwork. Your grandfather's talent for detail is rubbing off on you. Lily beamed at the praise, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. I told everyone about you at show and tell, how you make dresses with wood in them. Nobody believed me until I showed them Princess Sparkle's new clothes. Kate glanced at Jack, who shrugged apologetically. The doll went to school today. Special request. Everyone wanted to touch the wooden buttons, Lily continued. Even Miss Thompson said she'd never seen anything like it. She asked if you could come talk to our class about being a designer. Kate felt a pang of both pleasure and sadness. The innocent request highlighted everything she'd lost: the career, the recognition, the joy of sharing her craft. That's very kind of her to ask. So you'll come? Lily asked hopefully. We'll see, Kate hedged, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep. It depends on when I leave for Philadelphia. Lily's face fell, but she rallied quickly. Can I help in the workshop today, please? Jack nodded. Homework first, then you can help sand the rocking chair spindles, the easy parts only. Lily raced to the house to change out of her school clothes and grab her homework, leaving Jack and Kate alone again. I saw the bank letter, Kate admitted without preamble. I wasn't snooping, but you saw it anyway, Jack finished, his tone neutral rather than accusatory. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's been coming for a while. The custom furniture market isn't what it used to be. People want cheap, mass-produced pieces now. And then Charles Velmont shows up offering to buy your property. Kate said quietly. Perfect timing. Jack's expression hardened. Too perfect. Almost as if someone told him exactly when to make his move. You think the bank? Small town, Jack reminded her. People talk, especially about money troubles. Kate hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. What will you do? Jack's shoulders squared, his jaw set in a determined line. What I've always done, work harder, find a way through. Kate recognized the stubborn pride that would prevent him from accepting help, even as she admired his resilience. It reminded her of herself before everything had fallen apart. Jack, she began carefully, I should leave. Find somewhere else to stay until I can get to Philadelphia. My being here is only complicating your situation. Running won't solve your problems, Kate, Jack said, echoing his earlier words. And it certainly won't solve mine. He held her gaze steadily. Unless you want to leave. That's different. The distinction was important, between fleeing out of fear and choosing to move on. Kate considered her options, limited as they were. She had barely enough money for a bus ticket to Philadelphia, no guarantee her former professor would help her, and now the knowledge that Charles was somehow tracking her movements. I don't want to leave, she admitted finally. Not like this, not running scared again. Jack nodded as if her answer confirmed something he already knew. Then stay, at least until we figure out what Velmont's really after. Before Kate could respond, Lily burst back into the workshop, homework in hand, eager to begin her afternoon apprenticeship. The serious conversation was necessarily tabled as Jack helped his granddaughter with her spelling worksheet, while Kate returned to organizing the special wood collection. The next few days fell into a comfortable pattern. Kate's health continued to improve, and she found herself increasingly involved in the daily rhythms of the Miller household. Mornings were spent helping Jack in the workshop, where she'd begun assisting with the finer detail work that her nimble fingers were particularly suited for. Afternoons often involved helping Lily with homework or teaching her basic sewing techniques using the supplies Sarah had provided. Word of Kate's talent with combining wood and fabric spread through Oak Ridge's small community. Sarah brought over an antique jacket with missing buttons, wondering if Kate might create replacements from some of Jack's wood scraps. The town librarian, Mrs. Whitaker, commissioned a special bookmark with a wooden inlay after seeing Princess Sparkle's dress during Lily's class visit to the library. These small projects brought Kate both pleasure and a modest income, which she insisted on contributing to the household expenses despite Jack's protests. More importantly, they began to restore her confidence in her abilities, a confidence that had been systematically destroyed by Charles Velmont. Charles himself remained a shadowy presence on the periphery of their lives. His black SUV was occasionally spotted around town, and rumors circulated about his meetings with various property owners. Jack heard from Bill Jenkins that Velmont was staying at the Oak Ridge Inn, apparently conducting a feasibility study for his artisanal retreat concept. Strange choice of towns, Bill had commented. Oak Ridge isn't exactly a tourist destination. Jack had merely nodded, keeping his suspicions to himself. Every evening he checked the locks on the doors and windows before retiring, a precaution that wasn't lost on Kate. A week after Charles's appearance, Jack received a formal offer for his property, significantly above market value, but with an aggressive timeline. The letter, delivered by courier rather than regular mail, specified that the offer would expire in 72 hours. He's pressuring you, Kate observed as they sat at the kitchen table that evening, reviewing the documents after Lily had gone to bed. Using the bank deadline against you. Jack nodded grimly. Oldest tactic in the book. Create urgency, force a decision before all options can be explored. What other options do you have? Kate asked gently, knowing the question might sting his pride but needing to understand the full picture. Jack was silent for a long moment, staring at the documents spread across the table. Not many, he admitted finally. I've applied for refinancing with 3 other banks. All declined because of the existing lien. Considered selling some equipment, but that would just cripple my ability to work. Kate's heart ached for him. Jack Miller was a proud man, a capable man, someone who had built his life with his own hands. To see him cornered like this by financial forces beyond his control felt profoundly unjust. What about selling just the workshop, she suggested. Keep the house? Jack shook his head. They're on the same property deed. Can't separate them without a formal subdivision. which takes months and costs thousands in fees and surveys. He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. Velmont knows exactly what he's doing. He's not just buying buildings, he's buying leverage. Against me, Kate said softly, the realization settling like a stone in her stomach. He's trying to control where I can go. Who might help me? That's my guess, Jack agreed, though I'm still not clear on why. What does he gain by continuing to pursue you? He's already taken your designs, your career. Kate had been asking herself the same question. It's not rational, she admitted. It's about control. Charles always had to win, to dominate completely. She hesitated, then added, and there's one design he never got, my masterpiece, as he used to call it, a complete collection that integrated natural materials with high fashion in a way that had never been done before. Jack's interest was piqued. What happened to it? I hid the original sketches and prototypes before confronting him, Kate explained. It was my insurance policy, or so I thought. But then everything fell apart so quickly, and I had to leave New York with just what I could carry. A faint smile touched her lips. The collection is still mine, still only in my head. Maybe that's what drives him crazy, the one thing he couldn't take. Jack considered this. Or maybe he's worried you'll find backing in Philadelphia, develop the collection with someone else. That was the plan, Kate acknowledged. My former professor has connections to several independent fashion houses. If I could convince one of them to take a chance on me. She trailed off, the dream seeming more distant than ever, with Charles actively working against her. Jack was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands flat on the table beside the offer letter. Finally, he looked up, determination in his eyes. We need to buy time, figure out what he's really after, and find a way to counter it. How? Kate asked. He holds all the cards. Not all of them, Jack disagreed. He doesn't know this town like I do. Doesn't understand how things work here. For the first time since Charles's arrival in Oak Ridge, Kate felt a flicker of hope. What are you thinking? Jack stood, moving to a drawer in the kitchen cabinet. He withdrew a worn leather-bound book, what appeared to be a ledger of some kind. My father kept records of every project he ever built in this town. Every piece of furniture, every cabinet, every restoration. He opened the book, revealing meticulously detailed notes and drawings, including work he did for the founding families of Oak Ridge. Kate moved closer, curious. The ledger contained not just descriptions of projects, but names, dates, locations, a history of the town told through its woodwork. The Harrington Estate, Jack said, pointing to a particular entry. Old money, big house on the hill overlooking the town. My father restored their entire library in 1965. Ceiling beams, paneling, built-in bookshelves. Margaret Harrington still lives there. Must be in her 90s now. How does this help us? Kate asked, not yet seeing the connection. Margaret sits on the Historical Preservation Board, Jack explained, which has to approve any major development or change of use in the original town boundaries. A smile that contained more determination than humor crossed his face. And she owes my family a favor. Understanding dawned on Kate. You're going to try to block Charles's development plans. Jack nodded. Buy us some time at least. The Preservation Board only meets once a month. If they decide his proposal needs further study, he'd be delayed by weeks, if not months, Kate finished, admiration in her voice. This was a side of Jack she hadn't fully appreciated before, the strategic thinker behind the straightforward exterior. I'll visit Margaret tomorrow, Jack decided. Meanwhile, we need to learn exactly what Velmont is telling other property owners. See if we can find inconsistencies, anything that might raise red flags with the town council. Kate nodded, then hesitated. What if I confronted him directly? Called his bluff? Jack's expression immediately hardened. Absolutely not. The man's already proven he's willing to go to extreme lengths to ruin you. I won't have you putting yourself at risk. The protective edge in his voice stirred something in Kate, a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's cozy temperature. I'm not afraid of Charles, she said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Maybe you should be, Jack replied quietly. Men who abuse power don't suddenly develop conscience or restraint. Kate knew he was right, but the thought of Jack potentially losing his home and workshop because of her connection to Charles was unbearable. There must be something I can do. This situation is partly my fault. None of this is your fault, Jack said firmly. Velmont's actions are his responsibility alone, not yours. The conviction in his voice nearly undid her. How long had it been since someone had defended her so completely, believed in her so utterly? The fashion world had been quick to assume her guilt, to believe she was capable of theft and deception. Even some of her closest friends had harbored doubts. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me." Jack's expression gentled. Truth has a different weight to it. I've found you can usually tell when someone's carrying it. Their eyes met across the kitchen table, the moment stretching between them with unspoken understanding. Whatever happened with Charles Velmont, with the bank, with the uncertain future, they would face it together. The next morning, Jack dressed in his best clothes, dark jeans without woodworking stains, a crisp blue button-down shirt, and a navy blazer that emphasized his broad shoulders. Kate had never seen him in anything but work clothes, and the transformation was striking. The formal attire highlighted his natural dignity, the quiet strength that defined him. "You clean up nice," she observed as he prepared to leave for his meeting with Margaret Harrington. A faint flush colored Jack's cheeks, but he merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Won't be gone long. Sarah's coming to stay with Lily after school if I'm not back." "We'll be fine," Kate assured him. "Good luck with Margaret." After Jack left, Kate spent the morning in the workshop, continuing her work on a small jewelry box commissioned by Mrs. Whitaker's daughter. She'd been experimenting with thin wood veneers layered between silk, creating a flexible material that could be shaped and molded while retaining the beauty of the wood grain. The work absorbed her completely, the creative flow a welcome respite from the worries that had plagued her since Charles's arrival in Oak Ridge. This was what she'd missed most during her months of struggle. The pure joy of creation, of bringing something new into the world that hadn't existed before. She was so engrossed that she didn't hear the workshop door open, didn't realize she was no longer alone until a familiar voice broke the silence. "Still playing with scraps, I see. Some things never change." Kate's head snapped up, her heart jolting painfully in her chest. Charles Velmont stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a camel hair coat over a bespoke suit, his expression a studied blend of amusement and disdain. "How did you get in here?" Kate demanded, instinctively reaching for a nearby chisel, a pathetic defense but better than nothing. Charles raised an eyebrow at the tool in her hand. The door was unlocked. Small town charm, I suppose. He stepped further into the workshop, surveying it with the critical eye of someone assessing a potential acquisition. Quaint, very rustic. Kate remained where she was, the workbench between them providing at least the illusion of safety. "What do you want, Charles?" He smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. "Just checking on my investment. This property will make an excellent centerpiece for my new development." "Jack hasn't accepted your offer," Kate said, striving to keep her voice steady. "He will," Charles replied with absolute confidence. "Financial pressure has a way of clarifying priorities." Speaking of which, he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. "I have a proposition for you as well." Kate didn't move to take it. "I'm not interested in anything you have to offer." Charles placed the envelope on the workbench. "Don't be hasty. This could solve all your problems, and your woodworker friends too." His gaze flicked to the jewelry box Kate had been working on, still pursuing that little fantasy of combining fashion with craft. He spoke the last word as if it tasted unpleasant. "What do you want, Charles?" Kate repeated, refusing to be baited. He leaned against the workbench, entirely at ease. "It's quite simple. You sign over all rights to your designs, past, present, and future, to Velmont Designs. In return, I'll ensure Miller's debt is forgiven and he retains ownership of his quaint little house. I'll even throw in a generous consulting fee for you, enough to start over somewhere far from the fashion world." The offer was as insulting as it was transparent. "You want me to give up my life's work so you can continue stealing from me? That's your solution?" Charles's expression hardened slightly. "I'm offering you an opportunity to salvage something from the wreckage of your career, Catherine. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" Kate's voice rose despite her effort to remain calm. You stole my designs, destroyed my reputation, and now you're threatening the home of a man whose only crime was helping me when I was sick. And I should be grateful? Passion was always your downfall, Charles observed coolly. It clouds judgment, leads to poor decisions, like refusing my very generous settlement offer in New York. Kate's grip tightened on the chisel. That wasn't a settlement offer, it was extortion. Charles straightened, adjusting his coat sleeves with meticulous care. Call it what you will. The fact remains that you're in no position to negotiate. Neither is your woodworker friend. His smile returned, cold and calculating. By the way, I understand he's visiting old Margaret Harrington this morning. Touching, but futile. The preservation board won't save him. The casual mention of Jack's whereabouts sent a chill through Kate. Charles had been watching them, gathering information, preparing his move with the precision of a chess player. You're wrong about Jack, Kate said with more confidence than she felt. And you're wrong about me. I won't sign away my designs. Not now, not ever. Something dangerous flashed in Charles's eyes, a glimpse of the true nature he usually kept carefully concealed beneath his polished exterior. Think carefully, Catherine. This is your last chance to walk away with something. Refuse, and I'll make sure Miller loses everything, the house, the workshop, even custody of the little girl. Kate felt as if she'd been struck. What are you talking about? Small towns are such gossip mills, Charles said with feigned regret. I've heard concerning rumors about a strange woman living with a single man raising his granddaughter. No proper bedroom arrangements, no formal childcare qualifications. Child Services takes such matters very seriously. You wouldn't, Kate whispered, though she knew with sickening certainty that he would. Sign the agreement, Charles said, tapping the envelope on the workbench. Save yourself. Save them. Kate stared at the envelope, her mind racing. Everything in her rebelled against giving Charles what he wanted, against surrendering her creative identity to the man who'd already taken so much. But the threat to Lily, the thought of that bright, trusting child being taken from Jack because of her presence, was unbearable. I'll need time to think, she said finally, playing for time she wasn't sure she had. Charles checked his watch, a gesture so familiar it sent a wave of déjà vu through Kate. How many meetings had she sat through, watching him check that same platinum timepiece when someone failed to immediately agree with him? You have until tomorrow morning, he said, 9 a.m. at the Oak Ridge Inn. Don't be late. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Catherine, don't bother discussing this with Miller. If I see him anywhere near the hotel tomorrow, the deal is off, and I make the call to Child Services immediately. After he left, Kate remained frozen in place, the chisel still clutched in her trembling hand. The magnitude of Charles's threat overwhelmed her. This was no longer just about her designs, her career. He was threatening a child, an innocent 5-year-old who had shown Kate nothing but kindness and trust. She set down the chisel and picked up the envelope, tearing it open with shaking fingers. The document inside was legally precise, crafted to ensure she surrendered every aspect of her creative work to Velmont Designs in perpetuity. The generous consulting fee amounted to barely 3 months' rent in a modest apartment. It was, as she'd said, extortion rather than settlement. Kate sank onto Jack's workshop stool, the document clutched in her hands. Charles had outmaneuvered them completely. Even if Jack succeeded in delaying the development through the preservation board, Charles had found a more direct route to get what he wanted, leveraging Lily's security against Kate's cooperation. The workshop door opened again, and Kate jumped to her feet, fearing Charles had returned. Instead, Jack entered, his expression shifting from preoccupation to concern as he registered her distress. What happened? He asked immediately, crossing to her side. Kate quickly tucked the document behind her back. Nothing. How was your meeting with Margaret? Jack studied her face, clearly not believing her. Kate, what's wrong? She shook her head, forcing a smile. Just tired. Tell me about Margaret. Jack hesitated, then seemed to decide not to press, for now. She's on board, remembers my father fondly, says the library he restored is still the heart of her home. A genuine smile crossed his face. She's going to call an emergency meeting of the Preservation Board next week, citing concerns about the historical impact of Velmont's proposed development. That's wonderful, Kate said, though the victory felt hollow in the light of Charles's threats. It will buy us some time. More than that, Jack continued, his enthusiasm unmistakable. Margaret made some calls while I was there. Turns out 3 other board members have furniture my father built or restored. There's a good chance they'll vote to require a full historical impact study before any development can proceed. Which would take months, Kate said, understanding the significance. Jack nodded. Long enough for me to secure alternative financing, hopefully. I've got a lead on a private investor who specializes in traditional crafts businesses. His smile faded as he registered Kate's lack of matching enthusiasm. What is it? What aren't you telling me? Kate hesitated, Charles's warning echoing in her mind. Don't bother discussing this with Miller. But looking at Jack's concerned face, she knew she couldn't lie to him. Not after everything he'd done for her. Slowly, she withdrew the document from behind her back and handed it to him. Charles was here, she said quietly. He came while you were gone. Jack's expression darkened as he quickly scanned the document. A rights transfer agreement? This is what he's after? Not just that, Kate said, her voice catching. He threatened to call child services if I don't sign. Said he'd make sure you lost custody of Lily. Jack's face paled, then flushed with anger. He what? He's been watching us, Jack. Knew exactly where you were this morning. Said he'd heard concerning rumors about our living arrangements, about my presence in your home with Lily. The paper crumpled in Jack's fist. That's beyond low. It's despicable. It's Charles, Kate said simply. He always finds the pressure point, the thing you can't bear to lose. She swallowed hard. I have to sign it, Jack. I can't be responsible for you losing Lily. Absolutely not, Jack said firmly. We're not giving in to blackmail. What choice do we have? Kate asked, desperation creeping into her voice. He's given me until tomorrow morning. If I don't show up at the Oak Ridge Inn with that signed document, then we'll be ready for him, Jack said, a determined glint in his eye. This ends now, Kate, one way or another. The resolve in his voice should have been reassuring, but Kate felt only dread. Charles Velmont had resources, connections, and a complete lack of moral boundaries. Jack Miller had integrity, courage, in a community that respected Osahe, but would that be enough against someone who played by no rules but his own? As the workshop filled with the golden light of late afternoon, Kate and Jack sat side by side on his workbench, formulating a plan to confront the man who threatened everything they had built and rebuilt in their separate and now intersecting lives. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge with the cold clarity of a winter morning. Frost etched delicate patterns across the workshop windows as Kate stared out at the snow-covered yard, her breath fogging the glass. She hadn't slept more than a handful of hours, her mind racing with scenarios, each more troubling than the last. Jack's plan was simple but risky. Too risky, in Kate's opinion, but he'd been adamant. Some fights you can't walk away from, he'd said, his voice carrying the quiet certainty of a man who had faced his share of battles and knew which ones were worth fighting. After sending Lily to stay with Sarah for the night, a special sleepover they'd called it, not wanting to worry the child, Jack had contacted Dr. Mike, Bill Jenkins, and Margaret Harrington. By midnight, a small coalition of Oak Ridge citizens had gathered in Jack's living room, their faces grim as he explained the situation. Velmont isn't just threatening my property, Jack had told them. He's threatening this town, our way of life, and he's willing to use a child as leverage to get what he wants. The outrage had been immediate and universal. These people might gossip, might have their differences, but they closed ranks when one of their own was threatened. They were, Kate realized, exactly the kind of community she'd stopped believing existed. Now, as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the snow, Kate checked her watch. 8:30. In 30 minutes, she was supposed to meet Charles at the Oak Ridge Inn, sign away her creative rights, and surrender to his demands. Instead, she was waiting for Jack's signal. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Jack, emerging from the house, his phone to his ear. He looked up, meeting her gaze through the window, and nodded once. It was time. Kate pulled on her coat, not the threadbare one she'd arrived in, but a proper winter coat Sarah had insisted she borrow, and stepped out into the bitter cold. Jack met her halfway across the yard, tucking his phone into his pocket. Mike just called, he said, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Velmont's having breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Alone. Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. Are you sure about this, Jack? There's still time to change the plan. I could sign the papers. Buy us time to... No. The word was gentle but firm. We're not giving in to blackmail. Not now, not ever. He reached out, briefly touching her arm. You ready? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Together, they walked down the driveway to where Jack's truck was parked, its engine already running to warm the cab. The Oak Ridge Inn was the town's only accommodation for visitors, a two-story colonial-style building that had seen better days but maintained a certain rustic charm. As Jack pulled into the parking lot, Kate spotted Bill Jenkins's postal truck and Mike's SUV already there, parked discreetly at the far end. Remember, Jack said as he cut the engine, let me do the talking. No matter what he says, no matter how he tries to provoke you. Kate nodded, her mouth dry. What if he follows through on his threat? About Lily? Jack's expression hardened. He won't get the chance. They entered the hotel through the main doors, passing the small reception desk where the clerk, clearly part of the plan, nodded to them without comment. The restaurant was to the right, a modest space with a half-dozen tables and a small breakfast buffet. Charles sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall, a newspaper spread before him, and a cup of coffee at his elbow. The very picture of a man without a care in the world. He looked up as they approached, his surprise quickly masked by a cold smile. Catherine, I thought I made it clear you were to come alone. His gaze shifted to Jack, dismissive. Mr. Miller, this doesn't concern you. Anything that threatens my family concerns me, Jack replied, his voice level as he pulled out a chair for Kate before sitting down himself. Charles folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. I see Catherine has shared our private conversation. Unwise. He checked his watch, the familiar platinum timepiece. You have the signed agreement? No, Kate said, finding her voice at last. I'm not signing anything, Charles. A poor decision. Charles's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. I made a very generous offer, one that would have solved Mr. Miller's financial difficulties. He reached for his phone. Perhaps a call to the local child services office will help you reconsider. Make your call, Jack said calmly, but first, you might want to look around. For the first time, Charles seemed to register that the restaurant had filled while they'd been talking. At a table near the door sat Dr. Mike, in conversation with an older woman Kate recognized as Margaret Harrington. Bill Jenkins occupied a table by the window, along with two men Jack had introduced the night before as members of the town council. At the counter, nursing cups of coffee, were three more of Jack's neighbors. Small-town hospitality, Jack explained, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Everyone knows everyone, including the county child services supervisor, who happens to be Mike's brother-in-law. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Charles's face, quickly replaced by his practiced mask of confidence. Touching but ultimately irrelevant. The bank still holds your mortgage, Miller, and they've made it clear they're foreclosing unless you can make good on your arrears. About that, Jack reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Official letter from Oak Ridge Community Bank. Seems they've reconsidered their position. Charles took the envelope, his manicured fingers betraying the slightest tremor as he opened it and scanned the contents. His face darkened. What is this? Extension of terms, Jack said, plus a new line of credit for expanding the workshop. Impossible, Charles snapped. I spoke with the bank president yesterday. The decision was final. You spoke with Thomas Webster, Jack corrected, branch manager, but the actual decisions are made by the loan committee. He nodded toward an elderly man sitting at the counter, including Harold Simmons there, who served on that committee for 40 years. Harold's grandfather commissioned my grandfather to build the bedroom set Harold and his wife still use. Family heirlooms mean something in Oak Ridge. Charles's composure slipped further, a flush rising from his collar. This changes nothing. I can still... Release those photos you took of Kate and Lily, Jack interrupted. The ones meant to suggest impropriety where none exists? Margaret Harrington already filed a police report this morning about a suspicious individual conducting surveillance on a minor. Chief Adams was very interested. Kate watched as Charles calculated his options, his confident facade crumbling by degrees. She'd never seen him truly caught off guard before. It was both satisfying and unsettling. "You've been busy, Miller," Charles said finally, his voice tight. "But you're out of your depth. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "A bully," Jack replied simply. "One who's used to getting his way through intimidation and threats. But that doesn't work here." He leaned forward slightly. "This is Oak Ridge. We take care of our own." The phrase hung in the air, its significance clear. In the silence that followed, Kate realized something profound had shifted. For the first time since Charles had stolen her designs and dismantled her career, she wasn't facing him alone. The isolation he'd weaponized against her had been broken. "Now," Jack continued, his tone conversational but firm, "here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave town today. Your artisanal retreat plans will be withdrawn, and you will never again contact Kate Reynolds or anyone in this community." Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. "Or what? You'll run me out of town with pitchforks?" "Nothing so dramatic," Jack said. "But Harold's nephew works for the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's been very interested in the documents Kate preserved from her time at Velmont Designs, particularly those showing how you've been systematically stealing intellectual property and presenting it as your own." Kate's breath caught. This part of the plan Jack hadn't shared with her. "What documents?" Charles demanded, his gaze snapping to Kate. "The ones I mailed to my professor in Philadelphia before confronting you," Kate said, following Jack's lead, though her heart pounded. "Insurance, I called it then. Proof that the designs were mine, with dated sketches and notes in my handwriting." It was a bluff. The documents had been among the casualties of her hasty departure from New York, but one based in enough truth to be believable. Kate had indeed kept meticulous records of her design process, complete with dated entries and evolution sketches. Charles's face had gone pale beneath his perfect tan. "You're lying." "Am I?" Kate held his gaze steadily. "You know how thorough I was with my design journals. Every sketch, every inspiration, every iteration, all documented. Did you really think I wouldn't keep copies?" Doubt crept into Charles's expression. He'd seen her work habits up close during their relationship, knew her organizational systems. The possibility that she had concrete proof of his theft was entirely plausible. "Even if such documents existed," he said carefully, "it would be your word against mine, and I have significantly more influence in the industry." "In the fashion industry, perhaps," Jack agreed. "But securities fraud and corporate espionage? Those are federal crimes, Charles, with real consequences." Charles's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath the smooth skin. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes moving from Jack to Kate to the assembled townspeople, clearly recalculating his position. "This isn't over," he said finally, rising from his chair with as much dignity as he could muster. "Not by a long shot." "Yes, it is," Jack contradicted quietly. "Because if anything happens to Kate, to Lily, to me, or to anyone in this town, anything at all, those documents go directly to the SEC, the press, and your board of directors, simultaneously." Charles stared down at them, his expression a mixture of fury and calculation. Then, without another word, he threw his napkin onto the table and strode from the restaurant, nearly colliding with Bill Jenkins in his haste to leave. A collective breath seemed to be released as the door swung shut behind him. Conversations resumed, the tension in the room dissipating like morning fog. Kate realized she was trembling, the adrenaline of the confrontation leaving her system in a rush. "Did we just win?" she asked Jack, her voice barely above a whisper. He covered her hand with his palm warm and reassuring against her cold fingers. "For now, men like Velmont don't accept defeat easily. But he knows we have leverage, and that's something." "The documents," Kate began, guilt tugging at her. "Jack, Don't," he interrupted gently. "Some things are better left unspoken." His eyes held understanding. "What matters is he believed it, and that buys us time." Kate nodded, grateful for his discretion. Around them, the Oak Ridge citizens who had witnessed the confrontation were rising from their tables, stopping by to offer quiet words of support before heading about their day. No grand declarations, no dramatic speeches, just the simple solidarity of neighbors standing together. "I should get Lily," Jack said as the last of their impromptu allies departed. "She'll be wondering where we are." Kate nodded, her thoughts already racing ahead. Jack, what happens now with Charles? With the bank? One day at a time, he replied. The phrase not a deflection, but a philosophy. The bank extension gives us breathing room. As for Velmont, he shrugged, we stay vigilant, but we don't let fear dictate our lives. As they left the hotel, stepping into the crisp morning air, Kate felt a curious lightness. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges yet to be faced. But for the first time in months, those challenges didn't seem insurmountable. The drive to Sarah's house was short, the streets of Oak Ridge quiet on a weekday morning. Lily burst from the front door before Jack had fully parked, her face alight with excitement. Did you have a sleepover too? She demanded as Kate helped her into her booster seat. Sarah made pancakes with chocolate chips. No sleepover, Kate replied, smiling at the little girl's enthusiasm. Just some grown-up business. Boring, Lily declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. Jack caught Kate's eye over Lily's head, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Very boring, he agreed solemnly. Nothing exciting at all. The normalcy of the moment, this simple exchange, the routine of buckling Lily's seatbelt, the comfortable silence that followed, struck Kate with unexpected force. How quickly she had become part of this small family's rhythm. How natural it felt, and how temporary it remained. The thought sobered her as they drove back to Jack's house. Her health had returned, the immediate threat from Charles had been neutralized, and her path to Philadelphia was clear once more. There was no logical reason to delay her departure, the very purpose that had brought her to Oak Ridge in the first place. Yet the prospect of leaving filled her with a hollow ache that had nothing to do with her recent illness. As if sensing her thoughts, Jack glanced at her, his expression questioning. Kate managed a small smile in response, but turned her gaze to the passing scenery. The snow-covered houses with smoke curling from their chimneys, the old church with its white steeple reaching toward the winter sky, the town square with its gazebo draped in icicles like crystal ornaments. Oak Ridge was nothing like New York or Philadelphia. None of the energy, the opportunities, the cutting-edge design world she'd once inhabited. It was small, struggling, far from the centers of fashion and influence. By any objective measure, it offered her nothing that would advance her career or restore what Charles had taken from her. And yet, when they arrived home, Lily raced inside to check on Princess Sparkle, leaving Jack and Kate alone in the driveway. You're thinking about leaving, Jack said. Not a question, but an observation. Kate nodded, unable to deny it. I should. The bus to Philadelphia runs tomorrow. Jack was quiet for a moment, his breath creating small clouds in the cold air. Is that still what you want? The simple question caught her off guard. What did she want? For so long her focus had been on survival, on recovery, on somehow reaching Philadelphia and rebuilding from the ashes of her former life. Want had been a luxury she couldn't afford. I don't know, she admitted finally. A week ago, the answer was clear. Now, Kate looked toward the workshop where she'd spent hours working alongside Jack, where she'd rediscovered the joy of creation not for acclaim or career advancement, but for the pure pleasure of making something beautiful with her hands. Now, I'm not sure Philadelphia holds the answers I thought it did, she said softly. Jack studied her, his blue eyes thoughtful. Kate, whatever you decide, you should decide it for yourself. Not because you feel obligated to stay or obligated to go. That's just it, Kate said, frustration coloring her voice. I don't know what I want anymore. Charles took more than my career, Jack. He took my certainty, my sense of direction. Then maybe, Jack suggested gently, it's time to find a new direction, one he had no part in shaping. Before Kate could respond, Lily appeared at the door, calling for them to come see the new dress she'd made for Princess Sparkle from scraps of fabric Kate had left on the sewing table. The moment of decision was postponed as they were drawn into Lily's world of imagination and play. The day passed in a blur of ordinary activities, lunch preparation, helping Lily with a school project, a trip to the grocery store where Kate was introduced to what felt like half the town. News of the confrontation with Charles had spread, as news inevitably did in Oak Ridge, and Kate found herself the recipient of quiet nods of approval and the occasional direct word of support. Heard you stood up to that city slicker, Mrs. Whitaker said as she selected apples alongside Kate. Good for you, dear. We need more backbone around here. By the time evening arrived, Kate was emotionally exhausted, the weight of the morning's confrontation and the looming decision about her future pressing down on her. After Lily was tucked into bed, she retreated to the workshop, seeking solace in the familiar sense of wood and varnish. She found Jack there, working on a small project by lamplight. He looked up as she entered, setting aside his carving tools. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Kate shook her head, moving to stand beside his workbench. Too much to think about. Jack nodded in understanding, returning his attention to the piece before him, a small wooden box with an intricate pattern of inlaid wood forming a sunrise or sunset over stylized waves. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the colors of the various woods creating a natural palette of ambers, deep reds, and golden browns. It's beautiful, Kate said, tracing a finger along the pattern. For a commission? No, Jack replied, his focus on a particularly delicate section of the inlay. Just something I felt needed making. Kate watched him work, the sure movements of his hands, the quiet concentration in his expression. There was something profoundly peaceful about Jack Miller, a centeredness that neither success nor adversity seemed able to disturb. How do you do it? She asked suddenly. Jack looked up, questioning. Stay so steady, Kate clarified. After everything you've been through, losing your son and daughter-in-law, raising Lily alone, the business struggles, how do you keep going without becoming bitter or giving up? Jack was silent for a long moment, considering the question with the same care he gave to selecting the right piece of wood for a project. My father used to say that a life well lived is like a well-made piece of furniture, he said finally. It's not about avoiding knots in the wood or preventing every scratch and dent. It's about working with what you're given, finding beauty in the imperfections, and building something that lasts. He ran a hand over the smooth surface of the box. Some of the strongest, most beautiful pieces I've ever made started with wood other craftsmen rejected because it was too difficult to work with. The parallel to their lives, to Kate's situation in particular, wasn't lost on her. And what if the wood is so damaged it can't be salvaged? Then you use it differently, Jack replied simply. Maybe it can't be what was originally intended, but that doesn't mean it has no value. Kate thought about her own broken path. The career destroyed, the confidence shattered, the future derailed. Perhaps Jack was right. Perhaps it was time to consider a different direction, one that built on what remained rather than futilely trying to reconstruct what was lost. I've been thinking, Jack said, setting his tools aside entirely, about your designs, the ones combining wood and fabric. Kate nodded, curious where he was going with this. They're unique, unlike anything I've seen before. He hesitated, then continued. The jewelry box you made for Mrs. Whitaker's daughter sold for twice what she expected to pay. Said she'd have paid more if she could afford it. It was a simple piece, Kate demurred, though pleasure at the praise warmed her. Simple but innovative, Jack countered. And it got me thinking. There might be a market for that kind of work. High-end artisanal pieces that combine traditional woodworking with textile elements. Kate felt a stirring of interest. A niche market, maybe. Maybe, Jack agreed, but one with potential, especially with online platforms making it easier to reach customers beyond places like Oak Ridge. He reached beneath the workbench and withdrew a folder, one Kate recognized as containing his business records. I've been running some numbers. With the bank extension and the new line of credit, I could convert part of the workshop to accommodate fabric work. Create a joint venture if you were interested. Kate stared at him, stunned by the unexpected proposal. Jack, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, he assured her. It's just an idea, something to consider alongside Philadelphia. He closed the folder, his manner practical rather than pressuring. Sleep on it. The bus doesn't leave until tomorrow afternoon. Kate nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. A partnership with Jack would be a radical departure from her original plan, from everything she'd been working toward since leaving New York. It would mean staying in Oak Ridge, building something new from the ground up, rather than trying to re-enter the established fashion world. It would mean taking a risk on a small town, on a struggling business, on her own ability to create a new path when the original one had been destroyed. As she walked back to the house, the cold night air crisp in her lungs, Kate found herself looking up at the stars, brilliant and numerous in the clear country sky in a way they never were in the city. The vastness above her was both humbling and strangely comforting, a reminder that her problems, significant as they felt, were small in the grand scheme of things. The next morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow with diamond brightness. Kate had slept better than expected, waking with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She dressed in her borrowed clothes and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Jack already preparing breakfast. "Morning," he greeted her, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter. "Lily's still asleep. Late night with Princess Sparkle adventures." Kate accepted the coffee gratefully, warming her hands around the mug. "Thank you for everything, Jack. Not just the coffee." He acknowledged her thanks with a slight nod, returning to the stove where pancake batter sizzled on the griddle. There was no mention of his proposal from the night before, no pressure for an answer, just the comfortable routine they'd established in her short time under his roof. After breakfast, with Lily still sleeping, Kate found herself drawn once more to the workshop. In the clear morning light, she looked at the space with new eyes, not just as Jack's domain, but as a place where she too might belong. She could envision a corner dedicated to fabric work, storage for materials, perhaps even a small display area for finished pieces. It was possible, challenging certainly, but possible. The sound of footsteps in the snow alerted her to Jack's approach. He entered quietly, closing the door against the cold. "Thoughts?" he asked, nodding toward the sketchbook she hadn't realized she was holding. The pages opened to rough designs for a workspace layout. Kate looked down at her unconscious planning, then back at Jack. "It could work," she admitted, "but it would be a risk for both of us." "Most worthwhile things are," he replied, moving to stand beside her. "What about Lily?" Kate asked, the question that had been circling in her mind. "Having me stay permanently would affect her too." Jack's expression softened. "Lily adores you, Kate, but more importantly, she deserves to see adults in her life taking chances, pursuing passions, building something meaningful." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And so do you." The simple statement pierced through Kate's remaining doubts. How long had it been since anyone had believed in her potential so completely? Since she had believed in it herself? "I'm not looking for an answer today," Jack continued. "The offer stands, whether you take the bus to Philadelphia or not. Sometimes you need to explore all paths before knowing which one is right." Kate nodded, grateful for his understanding. I think I need to go to Philadelphia," she said finally. "Not necessarily to stay, but to close that chapter properly. To see Professor Chen, share what happened with Charles, find out if the path I've been fixated on is still viable." "And then," Jack prompted gently. "And then I'll know better what I want," Kate replied, "where I belong." Jack nodded, accepting her decision without judgment. "The bus leaves at 3. I'll drive you to the station." The morning passed with quiet preparations. Kate packed her few belongings in a small duffel bag Sarah had given her, adding the wooden burl Jack had gifted her and sketches for several design ideas that had taken shape during her time in Oak Ridge. Lily, when she finally woke, was devastated by the news of Kate's departure, her small face crumpling in disappointment. "But you just got here," she protested, tears welling in her eyes. "And you were teaching me to sew." "I know, sweetheart," Kate said, kneeling to meet the child at eye level. "And I've loved every minute of it, but I need to take care of some important things in Philadelphia." "Will you come back?" Lily asked, the direct question that adults so often danced around. Kate glanced up at Jack, who stood in the doorway watching the exchange, his expression carefully neutral. "I hope so," she said honestly. "Your grandfather has made me a very interesting offer about working together." Lily's eyes widened. "In the workshop? With the special wood?" "Yes," Kate confirmed, "but I need to figure out some things first. Make sure it's the right decision." Lily considered this with the serious contemplation of a child trying to understand adult complexities. "Okay," she said finally, "but Princess Sparkle will miss you. And me too." "I'll miss you both," Kate assured her, gathering the little girl into a hug. Over Lily's shoulder, she met Jack's gaze, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of hope and uncertainty she felt herself. The drive to the bus station was quiet, Lily subdued in her booster seat, Jack focused on the road ahead. The station itself was little more than a covered bench beside the general store, a faded schedule posted on a weathered board. As they waited for the bus, which was already visible at the far end of Main Street, Kate turned to Jack. 1 week, she said decisively. I'll go to Philadelphia, meet with Professor Chen, explore my options there, and be back in 1 week. She held his gaze steadily. If the offer still stands. It stands, Jack confirmed, his expression warming. Take the time you need, Kate. We'll be here. The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes and a cloud of exhaust in the cold air. Kate knelt to hug Lily one more time, then turned to Jack. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, all the unspoken possibilities hanging in the air between them. Then Jack stepped forward, enfolding her in a brief but firm embrace. Safe travels, he said as he released her, his voice slightly rough. Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She boarded the bus, finding a window seat that faced the platform. As the driver closed the doors and the engine rumbled to life, she pressed her palm to the glass. On the platform, Jack and Lily stood hand in hand, the little girl waving vigorously while Jack stood tall and steady, his gaze never leaving hers until the bus turned the corner and Oak Ridge disappeared from view. The journey to Philadelphia took 6 hours, the bus winding through small towns and stretches of winter landscape before finally entering the sprawl of suburbs that surrounded the city. As the familiar skyline came into view, Kate felt a curious detachment. This had been her goal for so long, reaching Philadelphia, connecting with Professor Chen, rebuilding her career. Yet now that she was here, her thoughts kept turning back to Oak Ridge, to Jack's workshop, to Lily's smile. She checked into a modest hotel using some of the money she'd earned from her small commissions in Oak Ridge, then called Professor Chen from the lobby payphone. The older woman's voice, warm and accented with her native Mandarin, was exactly as Kate remembered. Catherine, where have you been? I've been worried sick since I heard about the situation with Velmont. The concern in her former mentor's voice brought unexpected tears to Kate's eyes. It's a long story, Professor. Could we meet tomorrow? Of course, of course. Come to my office at the college, 9 o'clock. The next morning, Kate dressed carefully in the best of her borrowed clothes, grateful that Sarah's taste ran to classic professional pieces rather than trendy fashions. The design college was just as she remembered, a converted factory building with high ceilings and abundant natural light, the hallways filled with the creative energy of students rushing between classes. Professor Chen's office reflected its occupant, organized yet creative, the walls lined with fabric samples, sketches, and photographs from her 40-year career in fashion. The diminutive woman embraced Kate warmly before ushering her to a chair and demanding the full story. For the next hour, Kate recounted everything. Charles's theft of her designs, his systematic destruction of her reputation, her months of struggle, and finally her time in Oak Ridge with Jack and Lily. She showed Professor Chen her sketches of the wood fabric combinations she'd been developing, explaining the techniques and possibilities. When she finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pencil against her desk in the familiar rhythm that had accompanied many student critiques. This Velmont, she said finally, her tone contemptuous, not the first to steal from talented women, won't be the last. But you, she pointed the pencil at Kate, you did not let him steal your creativity. This is good. Thank you, Kate said, warmth spreading through her at the validation. These designs, Professor Chen continued, gesturing to the sketches. Innovative, unique perspective. The fashion houses, they would be interested. Kate felt a flutter of the old ambition, the desire for recognition in the industry she'd worked so hard to enter. Do you really think so? I know so, the professor replied confidently. I have connections still. Could arrange interviews, portfolio reviews. Belmont is looking for fresh talent for their accessories line. Reichman needs a new senior designer for their sustainable collection. She leaned forward, her expression serious. You have options here, Catherine. Real opportunities. Kate nodded, absorbing this information. It was everything she'd hoped for when setting out for Philadelphia, a path back into the industry, a chance to rebuild her career on her own terms rather than Charles's. But, Professor Chen added, surprising Kate with the qualification, I must ask, These new designs, combining wood and textile, they come from your time in this small town? Yes, Kate acknowledged, working with Jack in his workshop, seeing how he approaches materials. It changed my perspective. The professor nodded sagely. Creation needs fertile ground. Sometimes that ground is not where we expect. She studied Kate's face. This woodworker, this town, they have become important to you. It wasn't a question, but Kate answered anyway. Yes, more than I expected. Then you must consider carefully, Professor Chen advised. Fashion houses offer prestige, resources, visibility, but they also demand conformity, eventually. Your vision becomes theirs. She tapped one of Kate's sketches. This work is uniquely yours. The question is not where you can succeed, but where you can thrive. The distinction resonated with Kate, echoing her own evolving thoughts. Success had always been her goal, recognition, advancement, a name in the industry. But thriving, that was something deeper, more holistic. What would you do? Kate asked, valuing her mentor's wisdom. Professor Chen smiled. At your age, with your talent, I would go where my heart and hands could work together freely. She shrugged elegantly. But I am old now, with different priorities than when I was designing for Paris runways. Kate spent the rest of the day touring the design school, reconnecting with former instructors, even sitting in on a textile innovation class. Everywhere she went, she was welcomed warmly, her talent remembered and respected, despite the rumors Charles had spread. It was vindicating, healing in a way she hadn't anticipated. Yet as evening fell and she returned to her hotel room, Kate found herself not sketching new designs for potential interviews with fashion houses, but instead refining the workshop layout she'd begun in Jack's studio, adding details, solving problems, envisioning the space where wood and fabric could come together in harmony. Her phone call to Jack that night was brief but significant. I met with Professor Chen, she told him. She thinks I could get back into the industry here. There are opportunities. Jack's voice, slightly distorted by the phone line, remained steady. That's good news. It is, Kate agreed. But I've been thinking about your offer, about Oak Ridge. And, Kate took a deep breath, I'd like to accept, if it's still open. The smile was audible in Jack's voice when he replied, It's open. When should we expect you? The day after tomorrow, Kate said, certainty settling within her like a perfect puzzle piece finding its place. There are a few things I need to do here first. Those things included a visit to a fabric wholesaler Professor Chen recommended, where Kate invested most of her remaining funds in specialty materials she knew would complement Jack's wood collection. She also spent an afternoon with a patent attorney, beginning the process of protecting the wood fabric integration techniques she'd developed. When she boarded the bus back to Oak Ridge 2 days later, it was with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The path ahead wasn't clear of obstacles. The business would face challenges. The small town had its limitations, and Charles Velmont remained a potential threat on the horizon. But it was her path, chosen freely rather than forced upon her by circumstances. As the bus pulled into Oak Ridge just before sunset, Kate spotted Jack's truck in the small parking area. Lily's face pressed eagerly against the passenger window. By the time she stepped off the bus, Lily was already racing toward her, Jack following at a more measured pace, his smile warming his eyes. You came back, Lily exclaimed, flinging her arms around Kate's waist. I promised I would, Kate reminded her, returning the hug before looking up to meet Jack's gaze. Welcome home, he said simply, the words carrying more meaning than any elaborate greeting could have conveyed. Home. The concept had been theoretical for so long, a goal to reach, a place to find. Now, looking at Jack and Lily standing against the backdrop of Oak Ridge's snow-covered Main Street, Kate understood that home wasn't just a physical location. It was where you could be fully yourself, where your talents were valued, where you could build something meaningful alongside people who mattered. As they walked to the truck, Lily chattering excitedly about all that had happened in Kate's absence, Jack fell into step beside her. Sure about this? He asked quietly. One last confirmation. Kate looked at him, at the strength and steadiness he represented, and nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Together, they drove through the streets of Oak Ridge toward the house that would now be Kate's home as well. the workshop where they would build not just furniture and fashion, but a future neither of them had imagined when fate brought them together at a snowy bus stop on a winter's night. Life, Kate reflected as they turned into the driveway, was indeed like fine woodworking. You couldn't always control the grain of the wood you were given, but with skill, patience, and the right tools, you could create something beautiful from even the most challenging materials. Something that would last.